we'll start our discussion on data pre-processing. What is going to be done before the data is actually taken into the mining? What is required? What is required so that the data is going to be good enough for mining? That is what is data pre-processing. So data processing, pre-processing is a broad area that consists of number of different strategies and techniques. And these techniques that we are talking about in data pre-processing, they are interrelated in different number of ways, in different ways. Okay, so pre-processing is all talking about the requirements to see to it that the data that is going for mining is going to be in a proper shape, required shape, to be very clear. Okay, so while discussing about data processing, pre-processing, we'll be talking about aggregation, sampling, dimensionality reduction, feature subset selection, feature creation, discretization and binarization, and finally we'll be talking about variable transformation. We'll start our discussion with aggregation. Today's session will be talking about three things: aggregation, sampling, and dimensionality reduction. So the discussion we are going to start with aggregation. Aggregation. So what is that we are going to do in aggregation and how things are going to be in aggregation, we will discuss. So sometimes what happens is, sometimes if you have less information, that is going to be very good. And having less sometimes is considered as more. Okay. And having less is more is what is the case of aggregation. So in aggregation, what we are going to do is we are going to combine two or more objects into a single object. For example, let us look at this data set that we have here. This is a data set which has a number of transactions. Okay, the items that were sold, the location of the store, the date on which it is stored, it is sold, and the price of the transaction, price of the product. If you see, so for example, the transaction 101123, 101123, there are two transactions with the same transaction ID. Okay, and what is the items that are bought is a watch and a battery of watch at the location Chicago, and the date is so and so 9/6/2004, and the price is this one. So now it will most of the people who are mining the data will not be very interested about each and every item that is there in the transaction. So therefore, having each an item in the transaction to be sent for data mining is not going to be of any use. Okay, so therefore, in the worst case, what we can do is we can put these two transactions as one transaction with one ID. Okay, and we can say that watch and battery are being bought, and the store location is only one, Chicago. Date is going to be only one, and when it comes to the price, we can add these two, and then put them as a single entity, so that it will be easier. It will be easier for the data mining tool to have access to it, because each and every detailed transaction and the items that are bought, if we give them as input, it is going to be a very tedious. So therefore, what we want to do is we want to do this aggregation. For example, in the above case, where we have this data set, one way to aggregate the transaction of this data set is to replace all the transactions of a single store, with a single store-wide transaction. For example, let us say the store location is Chicago. So and on in Chicago, on a single date, for example, on the single date, this 09/06/04, all the transactions that happened on this particular day, irrespective of what the item is being sold, all of them can be aggregated into a single entry, a single entry. So this is going to be very helpful because all the details are not required. This type of activity is what is called as aggregation. So aggregation is generally used in online analytical processing, where we look at the analysis of the transactions that have happened. Okay. So as an example, let us look at the Australian precipitation example. So precipitation is talking about the rainfall or the snowfall or whatever has happened in Australia during a period. So this is the period of this precipitation is from 1982 to 1993. So now generally, for example, you are in the year 1994 or 2020, for example. If you want to know about the rainfall or the snowfall that has happened from 1982 to 1993, definitely we will not be interested in the rainfall or the precipitation that happened each day. We may not be interested in each day. We might be interested in a case where we take the transaction, we take the precipitation for each month. So this is the case where the histogram of standard deviation of the average monthly precipitation that happened from 1982 to 1993, or we might be interested in the standard deviation of the average precipitation year-wise. So we will not be interested in each day's or each week's precipitation. So therefore, what we are going to do is when such results are going to be required, we need to aggregate. We need to aggregate each day's precipitation to month-wise, or sometimes each day's precipitation is aggregated to year-wise. So this is the nature of the results that people will be interested in. So therefore, aggregation of the data, aggregating the data and promoting it to the higher levels. For example, if it is day, we promote it to the week, or promote it to the month, or promote it to the year. So such type of activity is going to be very useful activity when it comes to pre-processing. So aggregation is a very important process in pre-processing of the data. So this is what is the discussion we have about aggregation. So next we'll move on to sampling. So we'll discuss about what is sampling and how sampling is going to be done and what are the different issues that are there in sampling. So what is sampling? So sampling is a very commonly used approach for selecting a subset of the data objects to be analyzed. When we want to analyze a very big population or a very big huge data, in most of the cases, what we do is we take a subset. For example, when the election happens, okay, people who give the results of elections prior to the election, what they do not go to each and every house and find to whom they are going to vote and all this. They select a sample, they select a subset, and from that subset, they are going to take the results. Okay. So now, while doing sampling, we have to take care of a few issues that are going to be there in sampling. What is that? The most important thing that we need to consider is a sample must be representative. It means that it must be able to represent the voice of each and every nature type of. For example, in case of the election sampling, the sample that we have taken, it must be able to represent the opinion of all the people in the country. So that is what is very important. Okay, so a sample is going to be representative if it has approximately the same property as of the original set of data. If it is able to approximate the original data set, then that sample is going to be called as representative. That is what is very important while taking sampling. If the mean of the data objects, for example, if the mean or the average of the data objects is the property of interest, for example, then the sample is representative if it has a mean that is very close to that of the original data set. For example, we have 1,000 data units in the sample. Okay, the mean of these 1,000 data units is going to be, let us say, some 50. So among these 1,000 data units, you will pick 100 as a sample. So the mean or the average of this 100 is should also be very close to 50. For example, let us say 49.5. Then that sample is going to be representative. It is representing the whole data set. It is representing almost all the data sets, all the elements in the data set. So that is the way in which a sampling technique is going to be, and that is the way in which a sampling is going to be taken. So now, as we have discussed, it is used for selecting a subset of the data of objects to be analyzed. So when it comes to data mining, why do we sample? It is believed that it is believed, or it is very clear that when statisticians take a sample, they take a sample because taking the entire population into consideration is very, very expensive and very difficult for them. When it comes to data miners, why do they take a sample? Because for data miners, taking the entire data set or taking the entire population is not difficult, because the entire population is available for them. For example, we have an opinion. On demonetization, for example. It was long back, but still, if we have an opinion on demonetization, and all the people who have given their opinion is available to all the data miners, but they do not take the whole data set. They only take a sample because it is too expensive and time consuming to process all the data. Processing all the data is going to be very expensive, and it is going to be very time consuming. For that reason, data miners do not take the whole data, and they also take a sample. And the more important thing is, if the sample that is being taken is a representative sample, then no use in you taking the entire data. A representative sample is going to be very useful, and the time and the cost that is put into the data mining is going to be very. So therefore, sampling is also done. Sampling is also done in the case of data mining. There are many sampling techniques that we use here, but a few of them will be discussed here, and a few of them are going to be very useful. A few sampling techniques that we will be discussing about here are simple random sampling, stratified sampling, and passive sampling. So we'll start our discussion with simple random sampling. We'll then move on to stratified sampling, and finally we'll discuss about passive sampling. So we start our discussion about simple random sampling. So what is going to be simple random sampling? So when I say random sampling, so random sampling is going to be, you take any random data element and as a sample. Any random data element can be taken as a sample. That is what is going to be called as simple random sampling. Okay. So now when we take this random sampling, there are two different types of two variations in this random. The first one is sampling without replacement, and the second one is sampling with replacement. So sampling without replacement means once an item is selected as the sample, that is going to be discarded, and from the next time you do not select that. As each item is selected, it is removed from the set of all objects, and that together constitute the population. In this case, when it is removed from the population, the sampling is without replacement. So what happens is, each time we take a sample, each time we take an item, the number of total objects that we have at hand is going to get reduced. That is what we have to remember when we talk about sampling without replacement. Now, when we talk about sampling with replacement, the item that is being selected is not removed, from the population. So therefore, each time we select an item, the probability of selecting a new item is going to be same, because all the items are kept intact. No item is being removed. So therefore, all the items that are going to be selected are going to be selected with the same probability. So that is the difference between sampling without replacement and sampling with replacement. Depending on the requirement, any of the techniques, either with replacement or without replacement, the random sampling can be used. Now, the disadvantage with random sampling is when the population or when the data set consists different types of objects, okay, with widely different number of objects, simple random sampling can fail to represent those type of objects that are less frequent. For example, let us look at a transaction that has 1,000 entries. So we are talking about a transaction that is done at a store, and the total transactions are going to be 1,000, and among this 1,000 transactions, let us say some 10 items were being bought. 10 items were bought in this 1,000 transactions. Let us assume. So the first item, let us say 500 are bought, 500 transactions are buying the first item, and so on and so on. And the 10th item, let us say only one transaction. In only one transaction, the 10th item is being bought. Now, when we take a sample of these 1,000 transactions, and the sample size is going to be, let us say, 100, we are not very sure whether this transaction where the 10th item is being bought will be in the sample or not, because the sampling is random sampling. We are not sure whether the 100 transactions that we have selected will have the transaction in which this particular 10th item is being bought. So therefore, this random sampling is not representative. It is going to fail. It is going to fail to adequately represent those types of objects that are less frequent. So therefore, this is not a very good technique when different types of objects with a different number of objects are there. So therefore, we now move on to the next one, which is stratified sampling. Now, what is stratified sampling? Now, this stratified sampling is a scheme that can accommodate different frequencies of items of interest. So therefore, when we have different groups, then groups of items that are there. So as I've told you, the 1,000 transactions that we have, and the items that are going to be bought. The items that are going to be bought are in these 1,000 transactions are 10 items. Okay, so then what we are going to do? We are going to start with a pre-specified group of objects. It starts with a pre-specified group of objects. So now these transactions will be kept into how many? 10 different groups, so that all the 10 items that were being sold have at least one representative. Okay, so then after they are divided into different groups, then what happens is equal number of objects or proportional number of objects are drawn from each group. In the previous example case, we were discussing about the 10th item. The 10th item being sold only in one transaction. So in this case, what we will do is we will definitely make sure that that transaction which has the 10th item is going to be part of the sample, because we have divided all the transactions into 10 different groups, and we are going to make sure that either equal number of objects or proportional number of objects are drawn from each group. Because the 10th item in the previous example has only one transaction where it is being sold, we are going to make sure that that one item that one transaction is going to be part of the sample. So this way, stratified sampling is going to be far better than the simple random sampling technique that we have used earlier. Now, before going to the third sampling technique, we'll discuss about a few issues in sampling strategies. There are two important issues that we have to discuss in sampling strategies. The first one is sampling and loss of information, and second one is determining the proper size of sample. So we'll start with the first one, sampling and loss of information. So while taking a sample, the sample size plays a very important role. Let us look at this example that we have here. We have a case where, this is a case where 8,000 samples are taken, or 8,000 points are taken as samples. This is a case where 2,000 points are taken as a sample. And the third one is a case where 500 points are taken as a sample. Now, I can say that this is a very large sample, okay, and this is a very small sample. Now, if you look at the large sample, you can very clearly observe what the sample is about, and what is the picture behind the, or picture, or whatever is the intention behind the sample. So taking this large sample is very good. But these large samples, what they do is they eliminate the advantage of sampling. If you want to take such a large sample, why don't you take the entire data set? Why don't you take the entire data set when the sample is going to be so large? So therefore, having a large sample is going to give good results, no doubt about it. But instead of taking a large sample, the entire data set can be taken, because it is not going to be cost effective. Now, if you observe the second case, okay, now let us observe this third case, taking 500 points, a very small sample. So if you see this sample, if you see this picture, what is the intention is not very clear in this picture. Okay, small sample sizes, patterns may be missed, or erroneous patterns may be detected in the sample. So the actual pattern that is here is not detected in this sample, where the sample size is very small. Now coming to the other one, which is the 2,000 point sample. So the sample size is not very big. The sample size is not very small. So as in the case of the 500 points case, okay, we don't get erroneous patterns. The pattern is reasonably good. We can understand the pattern very clearly. We can understand the pattern very clearly in this diagram also. As in the case of the large sample, it is not wasting time, or it is not very costly. So therefore, this type of samples, where we take moderate number of, the size is going to be moderate, is going to be very useful. We have to be very careful that the loss of information should not be there, and cost is not going to be too much. These are the two things that we have to take care while taking a sample. This is what is about sampling and loss of information. Now we move on to the next one, which is determining the proper size of a sample. Now let us assume we have 10 groups of points. 10 different groups of points are there here. Okay, and we want to take a sample. And now this is a graph that we have, and this graph is about the sample size the sample size from each group, the sample size from each group, and the probability that a sample contains, the probability that it is going to give exactly as taking the entire data. The probability that the results are going to be exactly same as the way in which the entire data set is taken into consideration. So now let us start with taking one from each of the group. So each of the group is going to give us one item. Then the total size is going to be 10. So each of them is going to contribute with one item. Then the size is going to be 10, and the probability of getting the match with the total data set is very low. Is almost zero. As we increase, as we go to 20, if we go to 20, it means that each one of them is contributing two items. Each one of them is contributing two items from the group. Okay, so now the probability has increased to 0.2. And as we observe, as we go to 30, so from 10 to 20, we see a difference of 0.2. From 20 to 30, we see a difference of how much? 0.4. So this is the difference. So as the size increases, there is a very high chance of meeting the requirement. What is the requirement? The requirement is that the sample is going to be in such a way that we have taken the entire data set. So after 30, we go to 40. After this, we go to 40. Now, if you observe, from 30 to 40 as we go, the advantage is getting lower and lower. The advantage is getting lower and lower as we go from the way the advantage we had when we are going from 20 to 30 is no longer there as we are going from 30 to 40. And then we go from 40 to 50. This is the case. And then, so now if we are having 50, means what does it mean? It means each group is contributing 5 items. Each group is contributing 5 items, and a total of 50 are contributed. So now from 50 to 60, if I move, the advantage is very little, because I've almost reached perfection here, and there is very little advantage if I move from 50 to 60. And after 60, there will be no advantage. So therefore, so taking five from each group. Okay, let us suppose there are 10 from each group. Taking 5 from each group is going to be a lot of advantage, and it is going to have the same advantage of having the entire group. So therefore, instead of having the entire group, this 5 is going to give us very good results, because it is almost equal to the entire data set, number one. Number two, the time that is being consumed and the effort that is being consumed is less in comparison to having the entire data set as the sample. So this is how the proper size of sample is going to be lot of advantages when we are doing the data mining techniques. So now we'll move on to the third sampling, which is progressive sampling. So this is what we have done in the previous example. Progressive sampling, step by step. So the proper sample size can be very difficult to determine. So therefore, what we are going to do is adaptive or progressive sampling schemes are going to be useful at times. May not be always, but at times adaptive or progressive sampling schemes are going to be very useful. So these approaches, what they do is they start with a small sample, as in the previous example. They start with 10, where one from each group is going to be taken. Then what they do, and then increase the sample size until a sample of sufficient size has been obtained. So this is the way in which progressive sampling is going to go ahead. The technique what that we have used here, it eliminates the need to determine the correct sample size initially. Initially, we may not guess. Initially, we need not guess what is going to be the correct sample size. That is the advantage here, and it requires that there be a way of to eliminate the samples to judge if it is large enough. So, if in case just the previous case, no, in the previous case we have taken 50 samples, and we thought that we'll have more advantage, and we gone to 60, for example. So the advantage that we have when we go to 60 is not as good as what we thought. So therefore, we can eliminate these 10 samples that we have taken, and we can remain at we should have techniques to remove these 10 samples and remain at 50. So if that is the case, then going for progressive sampling is going to be a lot of advantages in comparison to the previous sampling technique. So this is what is the discussion we have as far as sampling is concerned. So let me just brief. We have discussed about 3 different sampling techniques. One is the simple random sampling, where we have discussed about 2 things. Number one is the sampling technique that we have where no replacement is going to be done. And second one is the case where replacement is going to be done. The disadvantage that we have with the random sampling, the disadvantage that we have with the random sampling is that the equal amount of balance when different types of objects with different number of objects are there in the data set, equal chance is not given to those which are less frequent. So this is the disadvantage that we have with random sampling. Now, when it comes to stratified sampling, this sampling is going to be the case where we have pre-specified groups of objects there, and then from each group we are going to take either equal number or proportional number of objects, and then we are going to create the sample. Then coming to the issues of sampling, we have discussed about 2 issues. One is sampling and loss of information, and number 2, determining the proper size of the sample. And finally, we had a discussion about progressive sampling, where the sample size is not initially decided. As we go ahead, we will be able to determine the exact sample size that is going to be required. So this is our discussion about sampling. So now we'll move on to the next one, which is dimensionality reduction. So we'll discuss about what is dimensionality reduction. As we all know, data sets will have a large number of features, and each feature that we take into consideration is considered as a dimension. So huge number of dimensions are going to be there when we take data sets. So dimensionality reduction or dimension reduction is the transformation of data from a high dimensional space where we have huge number of features or columns into a low dimensional space. So this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to reduce the number of features from the data set. We are trying to reduce the number of columns from the data set, so that low dimensional representation retains some meaningful properties of the original data, and it is ideally close to its intrinsic dimension, to the actual dimension. So in our any data set that we take, there are going to be a few features which do not make any sense in the result. For example, in the data set we have discussed in the previous example, where we are talking about all the transactions. Okay, there are different types of features that are available, and the feature. Let us look at the example now. So this is the place where this is the discussion that we had. Okay, the feature where we take the transaction ID, may not be very important when we are looking at the results about the amount of sales that has happened, in a store in a given month. So each date may not be very important in certain results that are required. So therefore, all the features that are there in the data set may not be important in the kind of mining that we are trying to do. So therefore, dimensionality reduction, what is going to be very useful, where we reduce a few features from the original data. So there are two important things that we are going to discuss here as far as dimensionality reduction is concerned. Number one, the curse of dimensionality, and number two, dimensionality reduction based on techniques of linear algebra. We'll start with the curse of dimensionality. The curse of dimensionality refers to the phenomenon that many types of data analysis become significantly harder as the dimensionality of the data increases. As the dimensionality increases, we all understand that the actual result that is required is going to be very insignificant, because as the dimensionality increases, the data becomes increasingly sparse. So the data becomes, so for example, this is the three-dimensional space that we have, for example. So as the dimensionality increases, the items get more and more. The points are going to become very, very sparse, very distinctly located, because we are looking at a lot of things there which are not required. So therefore, the data is going to become increasingly sparse. Because of that, it is going to become very hard to get the appropriate results. That is what is very. So the data mining techniques, like you take clustering or classification, the data mining techniques that we use will not be able to get the proper result. When the useless dimensions or the useless features which are not very important in the result are going to be there in the data. So therefore, dimensionality can be a curse at times. So therefore, reducing the dimensionality is going to be a very important pre-processing activity in certain cases. And now coming to the linear algebra techniques for dimensionality reduction. Okay, we talk about two of them here. The first technique that I'm going to talk about is principal component analysis. This is a linear algebra technique, and it is used for continuous attributes and not for discrete attributes. And it is trying to find the principal components or attributes that are linear combination of the original attributes. So sometimes in dimensionality, what we do is the old attributes are removed and the new attributes are being constructed. For example, 10 data items are going to be removed, and from these 10, one new data item, which is going to be a linear combination of all these different data items, is going to be taken into consideration, so that it is going to reduce the dimensionality, and it is not going to leave the original attributes, because their linear combination is taken into one attribute. So that is the case where principal component analysis is going to be useful. And number two, it is going to see to it that these attributes are orthogonal to each other, and they are going to capture maximum amount of variation that is available in the data. So this is the reason why principal component analysis is a very important linear algebra technique for dimensional reduction. And the second one is singular value decomposition. So this is also a linear algebra technique, and that is related to PCA, and it is also used for dimensionality reduction. So this is what is the discussion that we have as far as dimensionality reduction is concerned. So let me brief. So as far as dimensionality reduction is concerned, we have discussed that the data sets are generally going to have a huge number of features, and all the features may not be very important. So therefore, a few dimensions or a few features can be reduced. That is what is going to be dimensionality reduction. So as a proof for dimensionality reduction, we have discussed about the curse of dimensionality, where as the dimensions are more, it is going to become very hard for getting better results. So that is what, because the data is going to become increasingly sparse, therefore the results are not going to be very good. That is what is the curse of dimensionality in a few cases. And a few techniques that can be used for dimensionality reduction are principal component analysis and singular value decomposition. So with this I stop my lecture.